Today, I'm reviewing this guy, which is a giant laptop cooler that they claim can cool up to 44 degrees off of your CPU and GPU. I found closer to 15 to 20, but let's actually put it into a test. So I'm going to show you a few different computers running FurMark and some other things to see if their claims are actually true. So let's dive in. They did send this guy out for free for review. However, that will not bias my opinion in any way, shape, or form. At the end of the video, I'll also be going over what all this entails and all the different features and stuff like that. But let's get into the testing because let's be honest, that's why all of us are actually here. They say this is only for gaming laptops, but I also want to test kind of normal laptops to see if that'll also show some cooling or not. Do keep in mind, the limitation here would be the cooling for the laptop itself. Since this does have active cooling, which means it actually has a fan inside of it, it should work. So let's dive in with the Dell. Okay, so I wanted to run this test one more time just to make sure that I was getting accurate results, because there at the end it was increasing in temperature. I feel like OBS was a little too much for this computer to run because it's very old and just not super great for something like that. Doesn't have great graphics, doesn't have a great CPU. Right now, this test has been running for a few minutes now, and I'm still at 68 degrees Celsius on the CPU and about 50 to 56 on the GPU. And as you can see, temperatures are essentially the same at 1500. Now I'm going to go down to 800 and see. Okay, so again, hasn't been a terrible amount of time, but I think enough time to see changes. As you can see, the temperatures have gone up yet again, just a little bit, but we're still in a very good, comfortable spot. So now I'm going to turn off that completely. All right, so it's been a little while. It's not really moving a whole lot anymore, so I'm going to say we've kind of reached the end here. Not as big of a difference as I thought it was going to be. We're sitting at 80 degrees Celsius on the CPU and about 65 degrees on the GPU. Okay, so now I've got the Asus ZenBook 14X OLED Q4 10 that I reviewed on my channel just a little while ago. So the things that I'm wanting to pay attention to this time around: we've got the GPU up here. We've got what the core clock is on that, along with the core clock of the CPU down here with the usage right here. So the GPU is running at 98%. My CPU is running at 100%. We've got the average temperature of all of my CPU cores, and then along with all of the single temperatures for the cores. And then right here, we don't have a GPU temperature because for whatever reason, my computer is not showing the Intel Iris Xe graphics temperature. I'm not able to get that in MSI Afterburner or in the FurMark test itself. So I don't know what's up with that, but we're not going to be able to get that. So I'm going to let this run for a little while, look at the core clocks, and see where we're going for all of that. So right now, you can see some thermal throttling is already happening as this is kind of starting to trend downwards instead of upwards, and we're not holding that 3.3 gigahertz or whatever. We're running kind of all over the place. So I'm going to let it run for a little while, see what my CPU and everything gets onto, and then we'll do the testing with the fan to see if we see any improvements there. All right, so it has been running for a super long time. I mean, you can keep looking at this with how much time has gone in between. I'm looking more for averages while also trying not to spend my entire day testing this. So what I'm seeing is, yes, I sometimes get the 3100 megahertz here. However, most of the time it's trending downwards, going as low as 2500. So I am getting some thermal throttling, and when this does boost, it's because this is lower, so and then that boost. So if you know anything about CPUs and how they work, say, I don't know what the CPU is for this one, but 4.5 gigahertz, say that's how high like the maximum boost is. If it's doing that, it's going to be using a lot of power and energy and stuff like that. So it's going to create more thermals, and more thermals means that it needs to stay under a certain amount of degrees Celsius, or else it'll start to bring that core count down in order to reduce thermals. So it might go from the 4.5, which is creating a bunch of energy and a bunch of heat, down to 3.8 gigahertz, where then it's going to be using less power and therefore generating less heat, and then my temperature for my computer is going to go down, so it's staying in a safe range. What I'm hoping here is that I can turn on the fans that I can have a higher gigahertz or megahertz or whatever that they're going to be measuring. So that's why you're seeing some fluctuations here, is because the thermals are trying to stay in control. So it's going to try to limit this a bit. And right there, I just saw a 2300. So I definitely am getting thermal throttling here, where this number continues to keep getting lower. So let's try the fan and see if we can get this number back up while still holding good thermals. So I'm going to go start with the hardcore at 2800, leave it for a couple minutes, and then we'll check back. Also, the GPU went from about 1440 to, 1450 to about 12 to 1300. So that's also seen a little bit of a reduction. Okay, so it's been a couple minutes, seeing some pretty big changes. As you can see, my GPU is back at 1450. It's been holding steady right there. The temperatures on all of my cores, for the most part, haven't changed. I think they've actually increased, but when I'm looking at my core count, look at that, okay, it's just making sure I'm not blind. This is really far away and very small type. 3800 that I'm at compared to, we were creeping into like the 25, 28, 23, and now we're peaking at almost, that's 3884. Sorry, again, way too small of type. That's on a orange background, not super conducive to vision. But 3800, we're dropping down to about 3000. So we've almost doubled our core count there. Not our core count, but our megahertz. So as you can see, even though my temperature is up, because it's still being able to be thermally controlled with the fan, I'm actually getting a lot faster speeds, even though in this particular test, it is not actually netting me any difference from a performance perspective in the sense of frames per second. I feel like my computer's more responsive now than it was before, so let's lower this down to 1500. My core clock has been floating between 3000 and 3800. The temperature has stayed relatively the same, and my GPU core clock has stayed the same at 1450. So we're going to go down to 800 now. And what I'm seeing is that we are getting some thermal throttling, as the core clock for this CPU has gone from pretty much, I'm seeing 28 to 3500 instead of pretty much 3100 to about 3900 on average. So we do have some thermal throttling there occurring to the CPU. However, my GPU is still peachy at 1450. By the way, the fans for just my laptop itself is 42 decibels, because this actually has a great fan, and they did a great job at, one, it's two tiny fans, and then they also did a good job at making it the right pitch that you can barely hear it, and it's obviously not very loud anyways, so they kind of nailed it on the fan. And most of the time I never even hear that fan anyways. Sometimes having a giant laptop cooler like this is not going to behoove you, because the performance difference is not going to be that great. It really depends on the cooling system of the laptop that you have yourself. We're about to be doing the game difference, but I wanted to see what this was like without the cooler and all that stuff. All right, we're almost done with the testing aspect of this, but I did want to say I'm impressed at the thermal capabilities. The thermal, it seems like they really want to keep this around 85 degrees, and they're willing to really change the CPU clocks quite dramatically in order to hit that, which is pretty respectable, because none of this stuff ever really got to like 99, 100 to the true thermal limits of that CPU. And I guess you could say that means that you're leaving performance on the table, but it is helping with longevity. Anyways, point being, final findings, no fan, just the laptop itself. We have seen quite a bit of thermal throttling at this point. I'm seeing mostly 2,300 to 2,800 here. It does boost all the way up to 3,200 at times. We're getting pretty much the same exact temperature at around 81 degrees Celsius. And I am seeing a limit on the GPU as well, where we're floating between 1,350 and 4,050, where I'm seeing a lot more. Oh, we just dropped to 12,050 as well. So I am seeing thermal throttling on the normal thing. But again, our performance is not super drastically different. We've lost 1 FPS. But in general, if you're trying to do something super demanding, then it would probably behoove you to use this, because you're going to get faster core clocks, which means everything's going to be just faster. So moving on to what I'm really looking forward to, the gaming laptop. All right, so here is my Acer Predator Helio 16 2023 version, I believe. It's got a massive, I think, like 3700 HX or something in there, and a 4070 or 4080 or something. I'll throw the specs up on the screen right now. So let's get this bad boy set up. While I'm setting this up to work, this does not work for MacBooks, because MacBooks, at least the MacBook Air, does not have a fan, and therefore you're not able to increase the amount of cooling unless if you had a very specific cooling right here to cool where the GPU and CPU is on this guy. It's not going to work. So if you have a MacBook, this laptop cooler will not work for it. And yes, I did try it with my MacBook Air and I saw no difference. It was funny because the fan's so hardcore that it actually lifts this guy up off the ground. So that's an interesting note. Main things that we're looking at right here is going to be the average CPU degrees. The issue with this is that I've got two CPUs in this computer. I've got the ones that are built in with Intel, and then I've got a dedicated 4080. I don't know which one is which, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. It looks like this GPU 1 is going to be that one because it's equal to the 4080 laptop GPU over here that we're seeing with usage of 100%. This one probably isn't important because, again, it shouldn't be running for this particular test. So pay attention to that, and then this is going to be the core clock that we have over here, and then again we have the core clock of the CPU for this guy over here. So what I've noticed since I've started this test, while the temperatures again are floating around 80 degrees Celsius, also 80 degrees on the GPU, and we've got the core clock at 1500. So my fans on my PC right now, it just went down. So I want to say about 53 decibels. All right, so it's been about 2.5 minutes, and what I'm seeing is a pretty dramatic drop in the GPU. We've gone from about 80 degrees Celsius to 64, so we've lost about 16 degrees of temperature there, and my core clock is relatively the same at 1560 megahertz, although it is boosting to 1800, which I was not seeing before. As for the CPU, again, I think we've lost about 5 degrees Celsius. I forgot to look what it was at. I thought it was about 70, and we're at about 65. But my megahertz has gone from 2,000 to about 2,500, even though right now it's sticking to a nice 2,000 like it was before. So I find that to be a little bit interesting. So not seeing as big of differences here as we were before. However, I think my frames are a little bit better too. I thought we were at like 148 or something, and now we're in the 150s. So that's a little interesting. One thing to note too is that just because you have a lot of temperature, so temperature isn't always, like, depending on the manufacturer and where they put their tolerances, sometimes you can have a temperature of 99 degrees and not have 99 degrees Celsius and not have any type of thermal throttling. And then on other computers, they're going to thermal throttle that a lot sooner so that it protects the hardware. So it really depends from manufacturer and the CPU and all that kind of stuff when that thermal throttling is actually going to happen. So sometimes just because you have a lower temperature doesn't mean that you're going to be getting better performance, because if you're in that green zone, that Goldilocks zone, I guess you could say, you're going to be getting relatively the same performance. However, having cooler components does mean that they're going to last longer, because heat does kind of slowly destroy electronic components. So having something that's running at a cooler temperature is going to be better for you in the long run. All right, so it's been a couple minutes now. 65 degrees on the GPU still, same core clock. Down on the CPU, we're bouncing now from 65 to 68 degrees Celsius, and my core clock has stayed relatively the same. So moving it down to 8. Nope, let's do 600. All right, so it's been a couple minutes, not very long. Pretty much seeing the same thing. We've gained about 5 degrees Celsius on the GPU, and we're still about 70 degrees, same core count. Moving on to the CPU, we've gone from about 65 to 68 to 71, so another slight degree change there, but we are still at 2016 megahertz, so it's one of those that we're holding steady there. We have lost some frames, so we are back down to about 150 to 148 frames compared to about 153. Now, just to make sure that I'm not completely crazy and that this fan is actually doing something, I'm going to turn everything off and see what my temperature ranges go to in another about 2-ish minutes. So see you then. All right, so I don't think it's been quite 2 minutes, but I think the trend that we're seeing here is worthy of already talking. I just heard the fans ramp up just a little bit on my laptop there too, but we're at 79 degrees Celsius for the GPU, same core clock, same with the CPU, same core clock that we've been seeing, but the GPU is up at 77 to about 78 degrees Celsius. So we are seeing a good, nice little dip if we have this fan on max. However, we're not actually seeing a huge amount of performance difference because I'm still floating between 146, 143 to 152 frames. However, I am getting a bit lower at 140, about 148, 150 instead of holding true at about 153. So you are getting some frame difference, but now what I want to see is what that actually looks like when we play a real game. Not path tracing, so it's not going to be as demanding, but in general, it's cranked. And Cyberpunk is a pretty demanding game, so I'm just going to let it sit here. We're going to look right here into the sun because I want to blind you, because I'm cruel. Not really, but mostly because I have 109 frames per second. Or is it better for me to look somewhere else? Maybe it'd be better to look at the place that I'm getting the least amount of frames. I don't know. Anyways, my fans are cranked right now. The fans on my computer themselves are about 55 decibels. And as you can see, we're sitting here about 80 degrees on the GPU, 80 degrees on the CPU. Nothing shocking there. My CPU core clock is 32 to 35. And then on the GPU, we're at about 2250. So maybe part of the reason why I just wasn't maxing that out with for test. I don't know. I'm going to turn on the fans for about 2 minutes. 2800. Once again, the decibels on that are 69. Very nice. Okay, it hasn't been quite 2 minutes, but almost that, and we are seeing a pretty good difference. So we're sitting at about 65 degrees Celsius on the GPU compared to, what did I say? It was 80 degrees, so we've lost a significant amount of temperature there. My GPU clock has stayed relatively the same. I think we're boosted by maybe 100 megahertz. And then the CPU also lost about 13 to 15 degrees Celsius, and my core clock, I think it's gone up by maybe 200. I forgot, to be completely honest with you, what my numbers were, but I think they've increased by about 200. The frames per second, we've also gained some frames, so I think I was at like 96 or something when I was looking. I think we've gained about 5 frames. So I was about, I think, in the 90s when I was looking this way. When I was looking at the sun, we were at like 109, and now we're about 114, 115. When I was looking this way, I think we were straight at 100, and now we're at 106, and then this way I think we were at like 90, and now we're at about 97. So we have gained some frames there, which is worth it at the higher temperatures, which really could kind of make or break a certain game. So now let's go down to 15 and see if my memory will fail me yet again on all the different numbers that I've been spewing out today during the video. All right, while I'm talking, it'll be about 2 minutes. We've pretty much seen no difference. GPU and CPU clocks are relatively the same, floating around 33 to 3500 for the CPU and about 23 to 24 on the GPU. Temperature on the GPU is the same at about 64 to 65 degrees Celsius, and the CPU temperature is about 65 to 67 degrees, and we're holding true at about 102 to 103 frames per second. If I move over to the sun, same 114. If I move over here, I think we were at 106, so we've lost same frames there. And then if I move over this way, same frames there. So we're going to drop down to the 800 now. I actually want to do 600. We've gained about 5 degrees Celsius on both the GPU and the CPU. With the CPU, we are seeing the same core clocks at about 32 to 3500. And then with the GPU, though, we have seen a decrease in the core clocks just a little bit. We were floating around like 23 to 2400, and now we're floating at just 22 to 2300. So have seen a little bit of a decrease there. However, when it comes to the actual frames per second, we're still at 102. If we look over here, still 114, 106 there, and this should be 97-ish. And I'm at 99. So yeah, we're at the same exact frames and everything as we were before. All right, it's been a while, and the fans just ramped up to like kind of their highs that I usually hear it. So I figure I can give the results at this point. We've jumped back up to about 78, 79 80 degrees Celsius on both the GPU and the CPU. The core clocks are relatively the same as they were from the previous, of between, for the GPU, 2200 to 2300. The CPU is actually boosting a little bit higher, ironically, from 34 to 36, and somehow I've gained 2 frames per second. Not 100% sure on that one. Is interesting, although when I look at the sun, same thing at 114, should be like 106 or something, and we were 105, and then this way was what, 97, and we've gained 2 frames there. So yeah, I don't know. Life is a lie, and everything doesn't matter. I don't know. This is weird. Okay, so those were some interesting results. It was one of those that I did see, depending on the computer, some increase in the core clock, which would give you better performance, where with like my gaming laptop, they did an extremely good job with the thermals on that Predator, so I think that's kind of working against the Ilano a little bit, or Ilano, or however you say it, Ilano. Cooler is just like, they just nailed it on their core clocks in general and cooling already, so you're not seeing as big of a difference, where if you've got a different laptop that has more of a issue with where you're seeing a lot of thermal throttling, and it's not got super good airflow in it already, then I think you would see a big difference in this, because again, there is a difference between core clock and performance and temperature and all that I've already kind of beaten to death in this. So let's take a look over this guy right here so you can kind of have a better understanding of what it's all about. I'm going to do a top down, so I'm literally going to point you down to the ground. First of all, there's a plug-in on the side here. The cable that comes with it is way, way, way too short. It's about maybe like, I don't even think it's 6 feet. It's incredibly small. I'll show it to you here in a minute. This is the cord, by the way. It's not very long. I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'9", 5'10", and my arm span is not super long, and this thing barely reaches. This thing needs to be like probably twice the size that it actually is. But anyways, this is the device itself. If we're looking at it this way, this guy does come off like that. It does have some rubber on the back here, so that is nice. And then it has a little place for it. It's very plushy, very, very, very plushy. Does a great job at keeping all of the air, because when this guy is on, what it's actually doing is it's pushing air out sideways off this and then up into your computer. So if you can, it's kind of like a bowl like that if you're thinking about how this is working. I think it'd be interesting if maybe you also had some of the airflow right here, but I'm sure that they did a bunch of research and figured out this was the best way to do it. I don't know. I wouldn't mind having a more ball bearing or like better fan that's inside of this, that's less loud and is able to also give enough static pressure. If you've done any type of research on fans for desktop computers, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. I feel like this isn't as high quality of a fan as it should be for how big it is. The other thing that you have is you have 2 little clips here that come up, so that way if this is kind of leaning, your laptop can sit against this. The one thing that I don't like about this is that they don't have any padding right here, so I would like to see a little bit of rubber right there just to help prevent damaging or scratching my device. So when you've got the device plugged in, you've got your power button, you have to hold it. I can't actually feel that there's anything going on there, so I really don't like that button. I think that they could improve on that. You've got a blue LED, as you can see, depending on where I'm at, it will increase depending on where I scroll it. It does increase by increments of 100 with a low of 300 and a max of 2800. I did find the sweet spot for most places, unless if you're trying to cool it off really quickly. 2800 is good for cooling off something that's already hot, but moving it from probably your sweet spot's going to be between 600 and 1500 on this. And just doing a quick sound test for everybody so I can have a dedicated spot. I'm going to try to do this in a way that's actually conducive of the actual distance that you'd probably be at. All right, I'm at 53 decibels with it at 300, 60 decibels at 600, 63 decibels at 800, 66 decibels at 1000, 68 decibels at 1200, 70 decibels at 15, and 73 at 2800. And again, I feel that the tone, the pitch of it is a little bit annoying, so not the biggest fan of that. So that's another kind of critique that I would love them to kind of tune, is to have kind of a less annoying tone. as I found that I think lower tones tend to just be less annoying to the human hearing. Here's a quick sound test so you can actually hear what it sounds like in real life. I'm going to start at 2800 and then go down. That's 1500. That's 800. That's 600. That's 300. Over here you have three, I think, USB 2.0 slots along with an HD and then right here would be the device. So you get a USB-C and then you would plug that into USB-A on your actual computer. And then that way you would have 3 extra USB slots if you wanted it. And then on the back here, you have your step-up feet that go from 1 degrees, and then if you push out from this way, it'll go up again. Both of these don't have any type of rubber on the sides and can get a little bit goofy when you're playing with it. I don't think you actually necessarily need that because there's enough airflow anyways, and then you've got your normal rubber pads. Nice thing too is to prevent dust buildup. They do have a little dust filter here, and then you have the fan itself. Again, I'm sorry, this webcam is terrible at autofocusing the correct way. So it is kind of nice to have that because if you get more gunk and stuff on your fan, it's not going to work as well, and it's going to increase thermals and stuff like that, which isn't good. This particular model also came with a desk mat, which looks like that. Got the Ilano up there, and then kind of like, I don't know, global view, which is kind of fun. On the back, it does have the stitching on the sides. Actually feels really nice. I'm moving that around. Yeah, no, feels like a nice little mouse pad. So it is pretty big as well. I'll put the actual dimensions if I can find it on the screen right now. Next, you also get instructions, warranty, an extra dust filter. Thank you, camera. Can we really? So yes, dust filter, warranty, laptop, and then, like I said, the USB-A to USB-C port to plug that into your laptop if you're wanting to utilize those side ports. Moving on to the conclusion for this guy, they want me to send it in to them for them to review before I upload it, but that's not really how I work. So they're going to be seeing this at the same time as you are. I apologize for that, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But anyways, I think this is a good laptop cooler. They do have like an RGB version. It's one of those that it does do what they claim. I was finding 15 to 20 degrees Celsius decrease off of the temperatures. However, will that give you a lot better performance? As we discussed kind of previously, it really depends on the core clocks and how your computer is thermal throttling or not, if you're going to see a difference in performance or not. But lower temperatures does mean that your device is going to last longer, but it is one of those that this fan is quite loud, even on the lowest settings, is quite noisy compared to a normal fan. So I don't know. I think there's a lot more trades here than I was expecting at the forefront. But I think a lot of that could be mitigated if they used a higher quality fan inside of their main device with the just rotated, like the maglev stuff that you get with Corsair fans are super nice. I don't know if they could do a maglev. I don't know how much that would increase cost, but it's one of those that, yes, lowers temperatures. Does that give you better performance? Depends on the laptop. But it's well built. It's all plastic. Feels good. I have no complaints. It does take up a lot of space because it fits, I think, 15 to 20 inch laptops. I do like how it's able to tilt up because I've found that when you're working on a laptop or something like that and doing a lot of intense work, that if you have external mouse and keyboard, that it just sets it more comfortable, kind of like an external monitor does. So they did a good job on that. I like the control where I actually scroll up to increase the fan noise is good. It also feels really solid and is nice to use and is, for the most part, relatively accurate. I don't like the power button because I don't actually feel it pressing at all, so I think that they could do an increased job on that. But compared to my other laptop cooler, this guy right here, that actually does stuff where this one doesn't really do anything, so it's kind of a waste of money. It was a lot cheaper, and it has multiple fans. It has 5 fans, but they don't go super fast, but it's a lot quieter, and mostly it just makes it so you have increased airflow over the fans really doing anything. So I would be careful with what laptop cooler you do get, because like this one just didn't cool anything, where at least that one was actually doing something. So yeah, that was a super weird review, but hopefully it was helpful. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Of course, if you've been following my content for a while, please do hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, I will see you and your beautiful face on the next one. God bless, and peace out.